You have secure leaders. One end, you have secure leaders who are secure within themselves so that they pull and build people around them that are smarter, if not smarter than them, um, to do what's best on behalf of the organization. Or I'm saying you have insecure leaders, and those insecure leaders are micromanaging and want typically people who are yes people around them, and anyone who goes against the grain or does not realize that 10 plus 0 is only way to get to 10, but there's 5 plus 5, there's 6 plus 4, there's 7 plus 3. They're looked at as outliers
Mm-hmm.
in those communities. And so as a result, they're being forced out publicly or quietly quitting because of the stress and strain in those organizations.
Welcome to the Leadership Disrupted podcast. When we launched the podcast about 2 years ago, the intent was to find unique thinkers and explorers in the leadership space because it felt like the world was experiencing a leadership crisis. The old leadership playbooks were not working as well as they used to. People were and people are yearning for more from our leaders. And I wanted to have conversations with others about what that more could look like. These conversations have been wide-ranging, informative, thought-provoking, so many amazing thinkers. And we have another one for you today. Dr. Ruben Cockrell, or as some refer to him as Dr. C, his story is one of transformation, helping leaders and those they lead evolve, helping communities worldwide to evolve. His ongoing work advocating for equity and championing social entrepreneurship has led to mentorship programs and practical solutions in both corporate and educational spaces. He's known among leaders and educators for his ability to bring people together, creating impact that lasts far beyond a single event or classroom. The breadth of Dr. C's experience from boardrooms to grassroots efforts and even correctional facilities is powerful. And so, Dr. C, I'm excited about having you here with us today. I'm really looking forward to where this conversation goes. And maybe it would be good just to start with, any additional background information you might want to share to really fill in the picture regarding who you are, what brought you here today, how you became the person that you are today, and then we can take the conversation wherever it goes naturally. Does that make sense?
Yeah, definitely, Dan. I appreciate you for your invite to Leadership Disrupted podcast, and I'm looking forward to this opportunity to dialogue, to be able to share and be able to communicate, and where iron sharpens iron, whether we agree or disagree. At the end of the day, these type of experiences, whether you consider them stepping stones or stumbling blocks, you can learn from. I appreciate the intro. A little bit in addition to about myself, I'm key on the word disruptor, because as a disruptor and a disruptor in the leadership space, you have to be willing and comfortable being uncomfortable as a leader.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's a key piece really in terms of my background. My background, as I say, as the hook in a rap song, I mean, I went from drug trafficking to get a doctorate degree. I relate from the street to the elite, the classroom to the boardroom. And through those experiences of almost having 15 to 20 years federal time at the age of 19 going on 20 to a couple of decades later of doing work in 61 countries around the world, 11 books out, several degrees, certifications, and a bunch of other accolades. I literally go from one stream to the other. And I'm thankful for all the experiences I had as a leader. Earlier on, I just had to guide that leadership in a different way. However, there were transferable skills that I learned in the street that I applied as a 19-year professor in the classroom in terms of those transferable skills. And so I'm excited to be here. I'm big on the word disruption. because with disruption, there is a sacrifice to being a disruptor and not going along with the status quo, what's happening in society, in your personal and professional life. So thank you for being here, Dan, and let's kick it off.
I have done some work with individuals who are incarcerated or who have been incarcerated. And I've seen people make amazing transitions, and I've seen the opposite. People who do not make transitions, and essentially their time of incarceration becomes their story, and that story just gets retold over and over again. I'm always intrigued by what prompted you to start to tell yourself a different story about what that experience meant about you and what that experience meant about your life. Was there a transformative moment, or was it a series of moments? Let's dive into what drove that transformation for you.
That's a great question. That definitely was a transformative moment, but not the only moment. That was a transformative moment because being that some individuals saw something within myself that I necessarily didn't see. And so I had the core foundations, the family structure, and everything else. I just made some unwise choices and decisions. And as a result of getting a second chance, and at that time, doing the diversion program, not even having to do time, but doing the diversion plan program, paying restitution, that experience, as I mentioned earlier, was a stepping stone and a stumbling block experience that helped me to make some changes with intentionality in my life as a disruptor and move it forward in a different direction. And so that is why I've done a lot of work in the justice serve and justice impact the community. So just as an educational letter of reference, justice justice serve is when someone does time and they get out. Justice impacted is the family members and those in the surrounding community who are impacted by that experience. So that's just as a point of reference of justice serve community versus justice impacted community.
Did you find that even when you began to tell yourself a new or different story about who you are, who you could be, did the community around you support that, or did they hold you back to some degree? Did you have to swim upstream against the current of expectations around you, or did you have a support structure that was helping to help you swim upstream as well?
Yeah, I think it definitely had a support structure. I had a support structure. There were naysayers in place, but I didn't focus on the naysayers. I focused on the structure of giving a second chance in life and being able to move forward and yet allow that experience. I knew I was going to use that experience to play a part in the course of my life of how I move forward. Didn't know how it was going to play out, but that experience was a motivational factor because as an African American man, we don't get that many second chances. So to have that opportunity to have that second chance, I knew that I had to move with intentionality. I knew I had to move with mission, purpose, and focus. And that plays a part of my life framework now because of those experiences back then and other experiences I've had.
So then what I love about this opportunity with you and I is you, in your work in communities, keynote addresses, presentations, coaching, training in the workplace, you are seeing a world that many of us may not see. I mean, you're seeing a demographic that many of us may not see frequently, and you're exposed to stories that others of us may not be exposed to, and you have a unique point of view regarding all of that. So with all that said, I'd love to have a sense from you, like, what are you seeing in the workplace today? How would you describe the work environment that people are working in, people are leading in, people are trying to succeed in. My sense of it is it's pretty challenging. It's not what you necessarily see in the mainstream media, but I could be wrong. I'd love to hear your point of view.
Yeah, that's a great question. I don't think there's just one thing that you're saying. I think when you look at it from a leadership standpoint, no matter the times of what's going on, you're either seeing organizations that are successful or on edge, and it's all based upon the leadership. You have secure leaders. One end, you have secure leaders who are secure within themselves so that they pull and build people around them that are smarter, if not smarter than them, to do what's best on behalf of the organization. Or I'm saying you have insecure leaders, and those insecure leaders are micromanaging and want typically people who are yes people around them, and anyone who goes against the grain or does not realize that 10 plus 0 is only way to get to 10, but there's 5 plus 5, there's 6 plus 4, there's 7 plus 3. They're looked at as outliers in those communities. And so as a result, they're being forced out publicly or quietly quitting because of the stress and strain in those organizations. And I'm seeing it either as a one-off or as trends that are going on within those organizations. No matter if it's a municipality or government, a Fortune 100, Fortune 500. For me as a leaders, I'm looking at these scenarios. Is it a one-off or is it trend? Because the approach from a practitioner standpoint is going to be totally different if it's a one-off or a trend. So for me, looking at these things that are going on in organizations, the common theme around it is that everything is behavioral driven. And everything has to do with that leadership. And that leadership from the standpoint of creating environments and asking fundamental questions like this. Is this environment conducive for learning? Is it conducive for working? Does the leaders, because as a leader, there's a fundamental difference in spending time with your people versus investing time with your people. And I write that in one of my books because I can spend time with you, Dan, and like you today, but not like you tomorrow. But when I invest time with you, I'm doing it with intentionality, and I'm looking for ROI from a social capital standpoint, financial capital standpoint, and human capital standpoint. So by me intentionally investing in you, then I'm going to take time out to find out, what motivates Dan? What motivates Dan? And not just what motivates Dan, but what intrinsically motivates Dan? What extrinsically motivates Dan? So that, once again, I can know if there are certain trends or one-offs of what's going on, no matter what, I at least know. And sometimes, because of organization size-wise, you can't do one-on-ones like that, but you can train your staff, your team, additional C-suiters or whoever reporting. You set the tone as that leadership. And as C-suiters, what I'm seeing is at the end of the day, that just because you have a title does not mean that you're a leader. And everybody that is a leader necessarily does not have a title. And I'm seeing that across multiple disciplines, multiple fields in the industry, depending upon what their makeup may be.
One of the shifts that I've seen over the last 30 years is you go back 30 years ago, if you did have a title, you were a leader. You were viewed as a leader. You're given the job, you're given the position, and that position came with it some weight, some authority, some sense of, okay, you're the director of X, you're the senior manager of Y, whatever that might be. And people tended to follow your lead, so to speak. And I think slowly over the years, that weight of authority has gotten lighter and lighter and lighter. And so we started hearing maybe 10 years ago, phrases like, "Hey, leadership is not a title," it's not. But I think many leaders are uncomfortable with this lightness, with this sense of, okay, I'm accountable. I've got these accountabilities that I'm supposed to make sure these things happen. But just because I say jump doesn't mean that people jump. Just because I say do this doesn't mean people do that. And people want to. People have their opinions. They have their points of view. They want their work-life balance. They want psychological safety. They want to be treated with respect. And yet, for a lot of leaders, now I'm going to say for many leaders today, or for some leaders today, this is great. It aligns with their values. They're fantastic. But there are more than a small number of leaders who are still hoping for the old playbook, still hoping for the old authority, still operating on that playbook and thinking, well, I guess I have to push harder. I guess I have to talk louder. I guess I have to say more or write more. And in fact, it's working against them. And they're wondering, why am I losing people? Why am I getting turnover? I had a leader say to me, this goes back a couple of weeks ago, he said, you know what we need? We need a good recession. Because if we have a recession and we have some, higher unemployment rates, people will appreciate their jobs more. And he didn't even realize what he was really saying is, my people today, they don't appreciate their job enough. And if they're not grateful for their job, well, then I don't have power over them. Because he was using that old playbook, that old model of power or empowerment. And yet, I'm hopeful for younger generations of leaders who see the world differently and maybe are built to be a little more empowering. But I think the challenge, one of the core challenges is time. Everything you described sounds great and takes time and mental energy. And I can imagine many leaders thinking, well, that's great, but I don't have the time. They might have 8 direct reports or 18 direct reports. What do you say to leaders who say, yeah, I get it, it should be a priority, but I just don't have the time to care about my people that much? How would you respond, Dr. C?
Well, so a couple of different things. That's a reality that's happening. But if you look at, I think it's a quote by John Maxwell in one of his leadership books, Developing the Leaders Around You, I believe he says, people want to know that you care before they care what you know. Mm-hmm. And with that, when you look at things realistically from a geographic standpoint, you as a leader may not be able to do those individual one-on-ones. However, you can train with intentionality your team as far as whether it's those senior level administrators right below you, mm-hmm. You can empower those skill levels and those tools within them so that they are able to go ahead and carry out some of those practices of empowering their team so that things go smoother when they're not around than when they're around. And once again, that leader or series of leaders set the tone of, because as you mentioned, it's a very good point, because at the end of the day, we have to embrace change or we become the victim of change. Change is constant. And what's happening when you're looking at things from a multi-generational standpoint, when you look at that silent generation, look at the baby boomer generation, Generation X on down, the values and the core belief systems of whether it's a job or entrepreneurship is totally different amongst generations. It does not make one better than the other. However, those leaders that understand the breakdown of those generations and how they think and really grasp that, no matter the age, then those organizations are successful or working towards the right page. When you're archaic, you're stuck in your ways of, you ostracize out of subjectivity a whole portfolio of individuals that are working. And so on the flip side, when that comment was made on the recession end, that's also the greatest times that what entrepreneurship increases too.
Yeah,
So it depends
absolutely.
on what side of lens one may be in. That does happen a lot, that I see across the country, and I see that happen sometimes locally, regionally, or internationally.
And if you are operating from that old leadership playbook, the people you're going to lose first are the ones you most want to keep. Typically, it's going to
Yes.
be those folks who have that entrepreneurial spirit. It's going to be the ones who have that mental and emotional energy to bring to the workplace. It's going to be those people with the higher standards for themselves in their own life. They're going to move on because they will have, either for employment, they will have other opportunities, or they will have that entrepreneurial drive to build something of their own. And then what will you be left? You'll be left with the people who want you to be the driver, who want you to make all the hard decisions, who want you to be the leader who does all of the hard thinking. And then you're going to wonder, why am I so exhausted? Because I'm having to do all of this, and I can't get anybody to race forward with their own energy. It's because you probably scared all those other people away, or
Right.
pushed them away, and without maybe even realizing that you pushed them away. Because leaders, I don't know what your experience has been, but mine has been that leaders do not get a lot of great feedback, a lot of authentic feedback. People will watch you, they'll take note of your behaviors as a leader. Rarely will one of your direct reports come to you and say, I have some advice for you. The way you handled that particular situation, the way you handled that particular meeting, it's pretty rare unless someone has an executive coach or a leadership coach who's really paying attention, who's close enough to them or has enough access to see them day to day in the workplace. A lot of leaders don't get great feedback, so they don't develop because no one is helping them. No, as when we have kids, what our kids need from us is, they need their parent to, number one, see them, recognize what their strengths are, but also recognize what they're not doing well and not doing right, and then give guidance and coaching. You want to learn to ride a bike, you need somebody to give you guidance and coaching but if you're just doing it on your own, I don't know how a leader grows without any of that direct, actionable feedback from someone like an executive coach.
Yeah, I agree. I've seen that a lot with coaching clients I've had in the past. Is it goes down to what type of emotional IQ, EQ, and IQ that they have when they receive feedback. Because typically, a lot of those times, those situations, people don't speak up because they're their direct reports in fear of retaliation. And so,
Yeah.
if there's not an environment created that is conducive for learning, working, a person is not approachable, then one may be walking on eggshells around that leadership. So they tell them what I think you want to hear, or just quietly quitting. Situations happen. So they may not hear that feedback in their personal, professional, and civic realm. But the other side too is the ability to talk with people and not at people. And so as that leader, are you able to talk with people, good, bad, or indifferent, versus at them? The tone, the voice, as you were mentioning, the yelling environment, things along that line, people are not going for that. A lot of people are not necessarily going for that. As back in the day, it's not. People will call it out at times, or they just leave it. Like, I don't have to deal with this. And particularly if you're in a field that is quite competitive, and they realize that, hey, I am human capital, and I can bounce around, or I can move around, or either I can take the problem here, create solutions, and then consult and sell it back from a contracting opportunity to someone in that same organization or a different entity, then I've created an opportunity for myself. And so these are the mindsets of what I'm seeing out, working, training, doing workshops, professional development in these multiple industries.
We have a program called Giving and Receiving Feedback, And there's a segment or a module in the program related to performance reviews and how to give an effective performance review. And I'm always fascinated. There's a point in the program where we're walking people through. These are leaders who attend the program. We're walking them through the typical cadence of a high functioning performance review. And one of the final questions we recommend that leaders ask after they've gone through all of the sharing of strengths, sharing of what's working well, sharing where there are opportunities for enhancement, talking about metrics, like what's going to change, what are we going to develop or do differently, how are we going to track that. The last question we recommend that leaders ask, and they should ask it at a point where there's at least 5 minutes left, like there's a little bit of time left to discuss this. But we recommend that the leader says, so let's shift gears for a moment. Let's talk about how I'm showing up for you as a leader. I'd love to hear what's working, of course, but what I really want to hear is how I can be better. How can I show up in even a small way or big ways differently for you to be more effective as a leader for you? And to ask it in a way that it feels authentic, where there's enough time to have the discussion, where it's clear you're going to listen carefully. And we even say, the first time you ask this question of many employees, you may not get a lot of feedback the first time because it's a surprise to them. They haven't had a leader ask that question, and their answer may be, "Oh, you're fine. You know what? You're great. You're fantastic. No worries."
Right.
The next time you have a performance review, I would ask it again. Or I might find other times to ask it again, making sure that you're creating an environment where they feel safe and comfortable being authentic back to you. And you'll be surprised at the number of times that once they feel comfortable, then they will start to tell you those little areas where you could evolve a bit for them, particularly for them. But my point in sharing this is I always look to see how leaders react to that idea. And you'll see some leaders, typically the younger generations, their eyes light up. They either already do something similar or they just like the idea. They hadn't thought of it and they love the idea. And then you'll see the middle-aged and the older leaders, they'll take a breath, they'll think about it, and they're going to be good students. They're not going to push back overtly, but you can just see it in their eyes that they're not buying what I'm selling when we present it that way. That always is an indicator to me regarding where someone's mindset is in terms of why they're leading, why they're choosing to be a leader in their particular organization. I have a question for you, Dr. C. I was really excited. I went to your website. I did a little bit of research, and I was thinking that you'd show up today with the glasses where one is round and one is square. That's a fantastic set of glasses. I've never seen a set of glasses. Did you have to have that custom made, or did you find those somewhere?
Yeah, they were. I glasses are one of my signature pieces, and so I was out of the country, and they are prescriptions, and saw a concept and wind up having them made. So yeah.
I'll tell you what, I just so that people can understand what I'm talking about visually. He has a pair of glasses where one side has a typical round frame. It looks exactly like what you would expect from a round frame, and then the other side has more of a square frame. Exactly what you would expect from a square frame. And most of us, what we're used to is matching square frames or matching round frames. It was just such a pattern interruption because I had never seen anything like that, never even thought to. And I love it when someone does something that I've never seen before. Do you still have them? Do you still wear them like during your keynote speeches?
I do. I have them in black and brown. It's part of the disruptor in me. Chapter 2 in one of my books is thinking without any boxes at all, so you can create your own. Mm-hmm. And that's all a part of that concept, not necessarily fitting in the status quo. So that's one of the reasons why I chose that concept.
So when individuals or organizations reach out to you, either for individual coaching or let's say whether it's training, whether it's keynote speeches, whatever it might be, what are you hearing most commonly? Like, what are they most commonly looking for from you?
Typically, I would say it would be training. Um, Training typically, and based upon that training may drop down a subset into coaching,
Mhm.
to coaching, but typically the biggest thing is training.
And what
Doing training, and that may be and training um, based upon the suborders of the organization. So it may be training with the C-suiters, then training with the mid-level managers, training with the entry-level staff or support staff, or main clinicians. It just really depends, across the board. And typically, it may be a cohort style or a series of
uh-huh.
cohort styles, that are broken, up based upon roles and descriptions so that they can authentically be able to speak and share. And so for me on the training end, I am not a lecturer at all. I'm a facilitator. I believe it's equal opportunity for everyone to be involved and
Mhm.
engaged. And I feel you can impress people from far, but you in people's lives as a leader up close and personal. So really getting hands on and engaging. And then that typically, um, training goes to strategic planning or some executive coaching or assessments to come in and check the pulse of that organization.
Mhm.
So they all kind of go hand in hand, but usually it's kick off with training.
So what kind of skills or educational topic areas uh, do you, I guess, most frequently address?
So I created the tools for intentional excellence for 21st century leaders. And so in that, I have over 100 courses and workshops that I've created, that break down into the areas of career readiness, falls into talent management, organizational design.
Mhm.
It falls into personal leadership, and then some other subsets. So a variety of those different areas, and it breaks down into communicational, relational skills, professional negotiations, and several other key areas dealing with time management and very practitioner based related courses that I've just kind of created over a period of time.
You mentioned, I think it's on your website, one of your areas of focus is inclusion. Are you, do you have anything related to like inclusion for leaders or helping leaders create a sense of belonging or inclusion in their work
Yes,
environment or with their teams?
yes, I do. So mindfulness is a big part of my practice on a personal realm, but I incorporate mindfulness practice in all my leadership trainings. But I do have a certain set of courses that deal with that specific
Mhm.
area, that fall under the talent management and organizational design area.
So what do you see happening in the workplace that maybe other people don't see in terms of whether it's trends or common issues or common challenges in the workplace? Anything come to mind in terms of um, consistent issues or challenges that you either you are asked to address or you just become aware of because of your exposure to people in the workplace?
Well, I would say some of the trends I do see, is communication challenges, between senior leadership and mid-level staff, entry-level staff. I do a lot of customer service training, so challenges of certain marketplaces that are having an increase of different ethnicities and backgrounds, and they may be in their traditional thought process, but their market doesn't dictate that, and there's an increase in population size. So staff, team members are having to unlearn learned behaviors,
Mhm.
because as I mentioned earlier, they can embrace change or become the victim of change, but change is constant. Something is going to happen. So I would say that's a challenge. Also, professional negotiation skills. Um, a lot of what I don't like to say work-life balance, but work-life harmony. How looking at one's life personally and professionally and civically, how do you
Mhm.
balance it all? Is that realistic? Those are areas I'm seeing
Yeah.
across that environment and space. A lot of cultural competency uh, work I'm seeing across the board, um, that either organizations are being proactive or they're trying to do damage control
Mhm.
and being reactive and trying to go from reactive to proactive um, in that realm. Or unfortunately, but it's the reality, they're trying to do a check off the box because that's something that's required in order for them to get a check.
Yeah. And I had a client about a year ago. They came to us and they were looking for leadership development training for their mid-level managers. And when we first asked them what they were looking for, it felt very standard. It was, the story they told was, hey, we just want to refresh their skills. Some of them are, fairly lengthy in their career path, and maybe they're a little long in the tooth, so to speak, but they've got another 10 or 15 years left in them, and we want them to give feedback effectively. We want them to communicate more effectively, yada yada yada. It was all very, very standard. And it wasn't until we started to peel the layers away to really understand. I would ask for stories. I would say, so tell me what it looks like in your organization when you have a leader who's communicating effectively, when you have a leader who's giving feedback effectively, or give me an example of when it's not happening. And I really had to work overtime to kind of unpeel these layers. But ultimately, what we discovered was they had middle-aged, mostly white male leaders. Nothing wrong with that. That's perfectly fine. Their employee base, though, the frontline employees, were much more diverse. And even the frontline employees who were white males were more diverse, even in just viewpoints, just their way that they looked at life. And there was this vast disconnect between this middle-aged population of leaders and this younger group. And they were struggling because they would go through waves of new hires, and within 3 to 6 months, half of them would be gone. Then they'd go through another wave of new hires, and another half of them gone. And the feedback they'd been getting was that people just didn't feel like they fit in the organization. They didn't feel like they fit within the culture. And we had to do a lot of deeper needs analysis to ultimately uncover the fact that these older, middle-aged male leaders, they weren't doing anything obviously wrong. There was no obvious racism. There was no obvious, there was no bullying. There was nothing obvious. It was in the subtleties. So, for example, they had about 35% of their employees on the front line were female, and these men had what they were used to doing was, for team building activities, they would schedule after work events at the local bar or someplace that, some liquor serving establishment. And it had that kind of, I don't know, male vibe, male feel, not strip clubs, nothing obviously wrong. It just had a bit of a vibe to it. And many of the women didn't know exactly how to communicate it. It just didn't feel great to them. And then many of them said, look, I can't do anything after work. I have kids. I pick up my kids up 35 minutes after my shift ends. I can't do, quote, team building activities after work. And so there just wasn't a sensitivity to this working population. And what started as, hey, we just want to polish up, so we just want to refresh some basic leadership skills, became a much deeper dive into inclusive leadership, creating a sense of belonging, creating a sense of understanding, and taking the time to understand your employees, to connect with your employees, to see your employees, to the point where some of the employees said, I bet if you asked him, he wouldn't even know my name. And we found that actually to be true, that these leaders were so disconnected from these human beings that they would have to be reminded of what's that person's name? The redhead, the young one, the whatever. They would just not be able to connect with them. And so we had to do a pretty significant cultural transformation, mindset transformation. And it went well with some, but not well with all, because there are a fair number of middle-aged leaders who don't want to change, who don't think they should change, who think the world should change back for them. Let's get back to the way things used to be. I mean, I see you nodding. Does that in your life experience, does that reflect well, or have you seen similar things, or do you have a sense of that?
Yeah, I see that a lot. I see that a lot where it's a standoff, and as a result, that standoff and those challenges are happening. There's a direct correlation to that organization's bottom line, and so what I like to address is to put principles and things in place of how that correlation connects with their bottom line. And in most of those particular environments, if I focus in on those correlations and bottom line, I get their attention. But that is a challenge I see once again, where you have in certain industries, you might have one way of thinking of leaders. You got, like you said, you may have a group of middle-aged white male leaders that are used to this ivory tower environment, and the clients that they service, the services that they provide, service a certain community, and it's pretty much transactional. And I'm a firm believer that you can be transformational and transactional at the same time, and then leave the transformational piece out. And so those communities necessarily are a check off the box versus being able to build within that community, and really build a partnership. And there's a correlation to the bottom line. And so problems do happen. Staff, team members do see it at times. And then you have outliers that say, you know what? I've had this one way of thinking, but I realize I got to learn behaviors, and I need the help, assistance.
Yeah.
I may not come from this community or whatever. However, I have enough empathy to put myself in someone else's shoes. I may have not walked their life or walked their path, but let me put someone else in these shoes. For instance, I've got a story. It was a phenomenal story, but a particular client in the health field, and I was providing training for them and their leadership team, mid-level management, and they worked in a very diverse environment. And so when certain clients would show up and they may be a couple of minutes late, there was cancellations of appointments. This became a challenge, and the clients began to report this, like, this is really a problem. And so I was doing a series of training, not just that, but dealing with customer service, some other realms. And so I challenged that group because there was one particular area that the bus line ran through their health center that they were going. So I said, we need to do a field trip activity with the senior level leadership, the doctors, to do a field trip and do it in rotations. And they planned it where they actually caught the bus and would go to the bus routes that the clients went to get to that location. So they did it as a field experiment and study. And it was an aha moment, because to see the various barriers and challenges to get to their locations to seek out services, there was an aha moment or a level of empathy of wanting to learn behaviors and make certain changes and put in place, not not for your ones who are just habitually always late or something
Yeah.
along that line, but for those ones that they go through so many challenges and barriers of to come and seek out these services for healthcare needs for their children, for themselves. And so it was a great aha moment to hear from those clinicians. Some of them stuck in their own way, but having that moment from a practitioner base to really see empathy in real life, it was a great conversation, and some changes have happened, which has brought some changes within that organization. And that's a great aha moment that I've seen. But as you mentioned, Dan, you do have moments where you see in various industries where folks are just stuck in their way, and this is me. I'm gonna stay in this. I'm gonna stay right here in this box, and I'm not changing no matter what. And they stay stuck, and they miss out. And I look at it like this: as a leader, I challenge the leaders. I said, at the end of the day, within a 24-hour period, there's 86,400 seconds in a day, 1,440 minutes, and 10% of your day you have no control over. However, my challenge to you as a leader in your personal, professional, and civic life is, how do you give 100% to the 90% of the day that you have as a leader? Transforming your home environment, your community, your organization. Some things we can't focus in on. We can't focus on this area, but where you have a sense of control, how can you be a change agent in that particular environment? Not by what you say, but by what you do. Because at the end of the day, people rather see a sermon than hear a sermon from you any day.
Absolutely. And so much of what a leader sees in the world is based on what he or she wants to see.
Yes.
I had a circumstance, one of the leaders that I'm coaching called me earlier today, and he'd had a challenge because he'd invited his team over to his home to watch the Super Bowl, for a Super Bowl party. And all was going well. Everything was going fine. Good chips. You had different people supporting different teams, but all was going well. And then the Super Bowl halftime show starts. And the leader, the way he tells me the story, he said, well, I don't speak Spanish, so I couldn't really understand the music. So I got up and I went and refilled my drink, and I did this, and I did that. And I imagine that he took a while because he just wasn't interested, just was not interested, because he doesn't speak Spanish. So he couldn't understand the music. And he just went away. And then at about the time the game started up again, he came back and sat down to watch the game. And he said, I know we didn't say anything, but it was different. And I felt like I'd made a mistake, and I wasn't sure what mistake I'd made. I think some people felt like I was disrespecting the performer, the artist, because he was, well-known Spanish-speaking, Puerto Rican, Bad Bunny. And he said, I don't know. This is why I'm calling you, Dan. He said, I don't know what to do about it. And it was, I think, a great example of how a leader, at least he had the attentiveness to realize the tone shifted before and after that Super Bowl show. So I said to him, let's do this. First of all, you didn't even see the halftime show because you were filling your drink and you were doing whatever. So I think what you should do is go find a YouTube recording or find a re-recording online of that show. First of all, you should watch it. And then you should watch it from a different set of shoes, a different set of eyes. And we talked through this a bit. And I said, watch it through the eyes of your younger employees, if you can. And he has a fair number of Spanish-speaking, younger employees. And so he did exactly that. And it changed. And that moment of realization where he thought, okay, the way he expressed it to me, he said, when I watched it through their eyes, I could feel the patriotism. I could feel the excitement. I could feel the love. I could feel the pride coming through. He said, I sort of get all of that. Maybe I don't fully get all that, but I sort of get all that. And he said, now I kind of realize the mistake that I made, but I'm not sure what to do about it. So long story short, I think realization is a start. And then the best way to re-earn trust is through action. So we talked through an action plan that he could take that wouldn't feel like he was trying too hard, because you don't want to try too hard. You want to be sincere. But I just thought it was a great example of how people can be in the exact same experience and see completely different movies, see completely different situations and scenarios. And it's no, I think it's up to a leader to be able to view the world with multiple eyes. If you're going to lead a team, it's on you. If I'm just a follower, that's fine. I can see the world just through my own eyes, whatever comes naturally to me. But if I want to lead a group of people, I need to be able to proactively see the world through their eyes, whatever that world might be. I think in today's world, that's the only way you're going to be able to grab people, hold them, keep them, earn their respect, earn their trust, and then help them be the best that they can be as a leader.
Yeah, I think that's key. I think the acknowledgement, that's half the battle.
Yeah.
The acknowledgement, and then seeking out, is this something I can make a change with myself, or identifying resources that can help you to make that change. Kind of earlier in the podcast, I was talking about those stepping stones or stumbling block experiences. Both you can learn from, you become a greater person. And so evidently that was an experience that could be a stumbling block, but how he handles it proactively can create an environment and space where this is truly a stepping stone and a teachable moment.
Yeah. And maybe, it was helpful that he and I had this conversation, because I don't speak Spanish. I have no Spanish background. I'm a middle-aged white guy like him. And yet I watched the Bad Bunny halftime show and I thought it was so cool. I thought it was great. It was entertaining. I loved the energy. I loved the messaging. I loved all of that, so that he actually was able to see, oh, someone like me who doesn't speak Spanish could actually still really enjoy that. But that was a new awareness for him. And I think, hopefully more exposure to, people who think and see things differently can actually help him be a better leader for the people that he's charged with leading. And that's just one little example. When I think about the world we live in today and the world as it's evolving, we have so many different cultures, so many different mindsets, so many challenges, particularly younger employees. The world is broken in ways that the world wasn't broken for me when I was, starting in the workplace. And I think it's reasonable for employees to be a little cynical, a little challenging, a little doubtful about their leaders, because of the world that they're growing up in today. And that leaves it to leaders to step in and be better as leaders of multiple cultures, multiple mindsets, multiple perspectives, multiple opinions. And anyway, I'm not sure where I'm going with that thought, but it was a thought that occurred to me.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, once again, as I mentioned earlier, you have to embrace change or become the victim of change. And with the way our society is moving forward, in a multi-generational standpoint, and you look at that solid generation, that baby boomer generation that's phasing out on one end, but still working a lot longer on the other end, but retiring on one end. And then you're creating a new job workforce, whether it's working for someone or entrepreneurial realm. And so looking at those trends of, as leaders, and depending on what you leaders are, your organization, the ability to stay coachable, the ability to stay teachable, be open, those are key ingredients that will allow you some level of success. If you're going around reading your own press clippings and ego is your amigo, there's a challenge. And that
And it's so
and that
easy.
challenge, yes, that challenge becomes you become actively retired at work.
It is easy to fall into little grooves because doing that in that way works. Okay, so I'll keep doing that. And then this other thing, I'll do it this way. That works. I even find it like myself. I was when I first started working, the first time I had a supervisor role, I was taught to do performance reviews in a very specific way. And so I had that cadence that I followed with performance reviews. It would have been so easy for me to fall into that rut of just continuing to do. In fact, honestly, I did fall into that rut. That was until someone helped me rethink how I was doing it, until someone helped me rethink even email communication. Someone helped me recently rethink how I'm communicating via email because she said there's a lot of recent research that indicates people won't read more than 2 paragraphs at the most. Really, if you're going to send someone an email, it had better be a paragraph and maybe a paragraph and a couple of bullet points, and that's it. And she said, if you can't synthesize your message down to a paragraph, don't send it because you haven't thought enough about your message. And so my internal communications have gotten more and more precise. No, they're still personal. I still keep them friendly, but friendly in a pretty brief way, because that's the most attention you're going to get from employees. And if you're sending out an email that says, I need you to do something, lead with that. Lead with the action request. Don't bury it 2 or 3 paragraphs down. But I have found that my email communication, my verbal communication, all of my communication has had to evolve to be more concise, more precise, never bury my action requests. And I never really thought of it as burying it. But if you have an action request, lead with it, because you can't count on them reading the 2 paragraphs before you get to it.
Right.
And I think we are living in this world where we're all so inundated with communication coming at us. Plus, we're TikTokified, we're Instagram Reels, or whether it's Meta or Facebook Reels. There's so much short attention span building that I don't think we can fight it. I don't think you're going to overcome it as a leader. Instead, you as the leader are going to have to adjust to a world where your people are cognitively overloaded, where they have short attention spans. And if you're going to grab them, you grab them quickly and you communicate quickly and then get to whatever your point is. But that's not typical of me. I've had to evolve in that because as you might be able to tell, I like to talk and I also like to write. So I can fill up the page. I can write lengthy messages, no problem at all. It's one of the things that used to make me a good trainer is I could see a slide with 4 bullet points. I could spend 20 minutes on those 4 bullet points, just filling in. But that's not creating communication value today. Today, right. The communication value is in the simplicity, the speed, getting to the point. But evolving is hard. Evolving generally, creates some kind of pain of loss, I imagine. So, Dr. C, this has been really helpful, really informative, and just enjoyable. I want to be respectful of your time, though. Are there any final thoughts you'd love to share with people? We'll make sure the people who want to get a hold of you we'll have your website link and your LinkedIn link in the show notes. But any final thoughts you'd love to leave people with?
Yeah, I would just like to end this with, I mentioned earlier in terms of having that framework, which I think is key in your personal and professional. So mine is what I call I to the 3rd power equals P to the second power. And for me, on a personal, professional, civic realm, I involve myself like this. when I'm looking at opportunities as a leader, is I'm looking at opportunities is how can I make an impact? How can I be influential? How can I write? How can I create incomes, plural, equals operating in purpose based upon core values and principles, and be profitable, which equals social entrepreneurship. And that is the I to the third power equals P to the second power equation that I try to center my activities with intentionality for. And so that is an example of mine. One does not necessarily have to use that, but I do say that leaders have to take what I call positively selfish time to pour back into them. Because if you're constantly depositing into others, you're being withdrawn out of.
Yeah.
And things don't all of a sudden happen to us, physically or mentally, just out of the woodwork. Usually they're red warning signs. And there are challenges where our good intentions wind up being bad well-beings. So as a leader, it's key that you take that time to replenish you, to get refreshed and become renewed and rejuvenated, R to the fourth power, in order for you to remain effective, in order for you to be relevant to, depending upon what the market base you're in, and to be a subject matter expert in that area.
It makes perfect sense, because the more you fill your own battery, then the more you're going to have to give to others as you lead them and help them to fill their batteries. Dr. C, thank you so much. This is fantastic. I'm sure we will talk again. Thank you.
Yes, and I appreciate the opportunity, Dan. I've enjoyed myself and look forward to us connecting in the near future.
Thank you.